My name is Alan Riley, and I'm a media artist working with video and social practice filmmaking. I'm a PhD student in film and digital media at the University of California, Santa Cruz, with a designated emphasis in computational media. I create participatory artworks that explore human-mediated forms of human connection, such as games, film productions, and project-based learning. This talk is about Popcorn Movie, which is a theoretical and practical framework for generating narrative movies using a large language model and social interaction. Popcorn Movie generates live-action narrative movies using a feedback loop between the improvised spoken word dialogue performed by human players and textual narrative summaries that are generated by an LLM and read aloud by players. The feedback loop between the iteratively generated summaries and responding dialogue improvised by players produces a spontaneous narrative movie with continuity. Today, I'll tell you about my motivations and approach, the structure of the system, the format and results of some early playtests, and what I'm doing next. Creative projects incorporating LLMs have faced obstacles managing narrative consistency due to the indeterminacy of the technology. Additionally, it's not clear how the behavior of LLMs will influence the process of both individual and interpersonal creative decision-making. So to explore this, Popcorn Movie employs an interdisciplinary perspective that situates generative AI within the context of interactive media arts. I take inspiration from a variety of disciplines here, including surrealist games like Exquisite Corpse and improvisational comedy, particularly the yes and concept of continuity in improvisational performance. But today I'm going to be focusing on the aspect of inspiration in the project that draws from the methods of participatory video arts of the 1960s and 1970s, which used audiovisual feedback loops and social reflexivity to explore the communication affordances of early video. And Popcorn Movie similarly examines the medium-specific affordances of LLMs in the setting of an interpersonal co-creative media arts project that similarly uses reflexivity and feedback. In its current form, Popcorn Movie is essentially a party game for making improvised narrative movies. In the game, players gather in person and make an improvised movie using a phone and a web application. Players take turns reading narrative summaries of their movie aloud and then performing improvised dialogue that continues an ongoing story, which they record with the phone and upload to the web application, where their clips are appended to a growing video sequence that's available for instant playback. As players improvise, their dialogue is transcribed and stored in an emerging script. The script is condensed by GPT-4 into summaries and non-directive cues that are read aloud by the players. The system relies on the summary improvisation feedback loop to maintain an emerging and context-bound definition of consistency. The GPT-4 system message instructs the model to simulate the behavior of a script supervisor managing continuity in an improvised film. It's instructed to never add new information to the emerging narrative, to never suggest dialogue or specific actions, but to only produce summaries that are constrained to drawing from information inferred from the existing script. The intention of the summary is to merge the improvisations of different players into a shared workpiece. And the resulting script, like this document that's produced through gameplay, is really only used during the process of play. The output, the final output of a session is the edited video sequence. I conducted 3 playtests with the objectives of testing how the summary improvisation feedback loop would affect, one, a group's collaborative process of authoring an improvised movie, 2, whether the resulting movie would show narrative continuity, and 3, whether the feedback loop was enough to guide the group from an ambiguous starting point into an experience of purposeful group authoring. For the playtests, I ran a single instance of the application that participants accessed using a mobile device, a shared mobile device. To begin playtests, I read the entire system message aloud to help contextualize what we were doing. And I typed in a 1-sentence description into the application, which included the number of participants. So for example, we are in the woods, there are 3 actors. Participants were instructed to take turns using roughly these instructions to 1, read the latest summary aloud, 2, to record a 5 to 10 second video of yourself improvising dialogue that responds to the summary and the cue, and 3, to submit the clip in the application and then pass the phone to the next person. The playtests lasted approximately 2 hours. And the completed movies range from 2 to 10 minutes. We chose to wait until the end of each playtest before watching the resulting video to stay focused on our collaboration and the story. Players were surprised to see how smoothly their clips kind of flowed together after play sessions that were sort of interspersed with lots of reflective conversations. The summary improvisation feedback loop appeared to encourage participation. Players were initially hesitant to contribute during the first round, but warmed up to collaborative authoring once their dialogue was incorporated into a summary. The act of reading aloud appeared to bond participants around the narrative, which emerged as a collectively owned workpiece. Participants often laughed together when reading aloud, which created a positive environment and encouraged experimentation and lots of back-channel conversation around the emerging story. Excuse me. The feedback loop reflected words and themes back to the players, focusing their attention on repeated details in emerging storylines, which created the impression of narrative continuity, even though the players did not know where the film was heading. The summaries asserted the validity and relevance of each player's contributions and improvisations, even when they weren't sure about what they were contributing, fusing the details into a larger whole. Creating a feeling of narrative progression amidst the repetition was challenging for the players. However, they developed an authorial sense of purpose by collectively playing against the system, by introducing plot twists and new information to try and challenge the model. This had the effect of introducing more dramatic but thematically consistent events into the story. So for example, a player responded to another player's childhood memories of imagining goblins in the woods by interjecting that they might all become goblins. Using a fixed turn-taking order inadvertently suppressed the, I think that maybe we went out of sync with the slides there. Just to want to go, thank you so much. This is the slide that was about the, feelings of narrative progression, playing against the system. So this is an example of one actor's dialogue, the resulting summary, and then the responding improvised dialogue. And using a fixed turn-taking order seemed to inadvertently suppress the reciprocal dialogue between characters. Additionally, the reliance on only transcribing dialogue without detecting visual action seemed to result in excessively introspective monologues, steering characters into their own individual stories. Summaries and cues also became increasingly ponderous. For example, how does this sudden solitude and the disappearance of familiar elements and beings shape your understanding of identity and presence within the forest? Other undesirable system behavior included Cues that are overly ambiguous, such as, what do you think about what actor one just said? Or overly directive, such as, ask actor one why they feel that way. More work needs to be done classifying types of questions, identifying system messages that might lead participants to interact with each other more directly, and possibly also incorporating visual and auditory data into the process. However, all of this led to fun moments of watching short narrative movies about contemplation, which led to insightful conversations among the participants. Live interaction with dynamic narrative feedback may be useful in assisting users in understanding the underlying properties and characteristics of LLMs to support further critical and creative engagement with this technology. In such approaches, providing methods for participants to reposition their roles in relation to AI-generated content is important in cultivating critical and creative perspectives. And this will require a combination of mutually supportive social and technical practices. Particularly, thank you. Particularly, this approach could also be incorporated, practically, this approach could also be incorporated into a variety of applications, games, and social media, or virtual performance. Placing the ongoing summary into an additional loop with a database and storing important states, objects, and facts could support authoring interactive fiction as well. The current iteration of the project takes place in a live-action embodied film production setting that could also be adapted into settings based around live-action role-playing or forms of collaboration between youth and instructors in project-based learning settings as well. One thing that I'm realizing that didn't necessarily come through in my prepared notes about this that I'd love to just mention is that there's in the way that the summaries are formulated. You saw some examples which maybe you had the opportunity to read while I was speaking, but there's a very specific balance between the ambiguity and the directiveness of the summaries. And that feels like the big area of continued work on this that I'm interested in, because the intent is to really reflect back to the participants what they're doing. That of course will always be done with some bias or sort of shaping process. It's a mediated reflection of what they've all said. So crafting that kind of shared shaped summary that influences the behavior of the group is the sort of the heart of the project. As it is, I have continued to adapt this into different settings. You know, I just showed you the playtest version. I've been implementing this same technology in some other live performances. So for example, I implemented the framework in a comedic live science fiction show where I conducted an interview with a blob of video feedback. So every time I asked a question, I was given a summary of my question and then just kind of continued this absurd performance. And I also produced an additional kind of more sinister live show where the blob of video feedback is performing covert influence operations on a group, trying to have a conversation about what they're trying to figure out what their conversation is about. So in addition to conducting more playtests with Popcorn Movie, I wanted to also mention that it's part of a broader project. Like I'm interested in further kind of working with this as a module of different artworks, sort of iterating on artworks that use this sort of feedback loop process. And that is what I mean by dynamic narrative feedback for spontaneous live action video storytelling. And just one more thing is that this is a link to the videos if you wanted to check out some of the playtest videos. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Do we have any from the audience? Yes.
Thank you, Alan, for being here and share with us this amazing thing. I have like 2 questions right now. The first one is how long it took you from the idea, you have this idea and you're going to develop, and there is like a legal term around the IP, the IP from the users, and like terms and conditions, what about, and also it's going to evolve, like, maybe like a big tech corporation is gonna be like, this is huge. Have you ever think about it? Because it's gonna be like a shady figure around. Thank you.
Excuse me. Yes, there are many shady figures. I mean, just in terms of like it changing, yes, I mentioned this in the paper that every time I conducted the play test, the system behaved differently, and then I had to go back in and sort of fiddle with the system message in my API request to get it to come back to the constrained behavior that I was looking for. So it's not something that I am like deploying at scale. The web application that I have currently is able to only run 1 instance at a time. So it's really just, this isn't something that I'm developing as a product that's going to be like deployed in a massive way. It's something that's intended for implementation in specific artworks. And in terms of the question about the project timeline, that's a great question. I should write another paper about the development of this because it was an interesting process. But to just give you the dates, I started working on this idea in the summer of 2023.